Of all the different deployment scenarios that you can consider using SharePoint 2010 in, we're most excited about being able to use it as a true application development platform. We're actually using all of those features in addition to our own business logic to meet our critical business processing needs.
We've been envisioning a new mashup concept, taking all this disparate data from a map, Excel data, our Visio documents, and now allowing all that big composite application being mashed up in one very cool site.
The areas that I'm most excited about is the wiki. We've been adopting that like crazy here at Sony.
Microsoft has made good investments, especially around the social side in 2010, and those are the things we're really excited about.
So it becomes something that's not just handling your data, it's not just another file server, it's something we can actually build applications on and build something that's visually satisfying.
Very recently we've adopted the location-free work environment. So with that, they're going to be able to concentrate on a one-stop shop basically to do their day-to-day functions. And SharePoint's going to be that platform that basically ties it all together.
SharePoint Workspace 2010 allows our business users to take documents, lists offline. When they get back online, we can synchronize the documents. It's a huge feature because we've got a fairly large mobile workforce.
I think a lot of different companies share the same issues that we run into, our biggest ones being collaboration and also organizing and being able to surface information for our different business users. SharePoint 2010 helps facilitate that with their taxonomy, their metadata management information, and being able to surface that information in search, providing the information to people faster.
Enterprise search for us is very important. We have information stored in all sorts of data stores. FAST is an enterprise search that we can begin to connect some of these other systems to and start to call that information.
New features of records management allow us to take advantage of new document sets, allows us to make it easier for us to archive our documents, have great security, have great document management, and for us, those features are very, very important.
I see SharePoint 2010 being a success here at Chevron simply because of the time savings. It enables easier development, it enables web content management, document management.
Using the new SharePoint BI solution, using Excel and Excel services and Performance Point, will allow us to create a dashboard for our VPs to make quick decisions about products. So for us, it allows us to create a dashboard, allow them to go to one place to get the one Del Monte truth.
Because the application that we chose for SharePoint 2010 is such a critical part of our day-to-day business operations, we're sort of living and dying by the success of this program based on SharePoint 2010.
Conservation International is an environmental NGO. We're a non-profit. We have offices in about 40 countries, and we work to protect nature. We do a lot of science work. We do a lot of field demonstration work. And our goal is to prove that humanity needs nature to survive and thrive.
Our website really is the face of our brand. We don't do a lot of marketing, so the website is it. It is the gateway for all of our donors and supporters and partners to learn about who we are and what we do, and for us to share our stories with them.
We're in a business that's highly visual in that we work with many countries. We work with species, we work with landscapes, we work with very broad global issues. So it was very important for us to have a website where you could easily roll out a lot of photography, a lot of videos, a lot of narratives, a lot of stories.
If I do say so myself, I think our website's beautiful, and you'd think that there was a huge team behind it. SharePoint has allowed for this small team to really create such a beautiful, engaging website. We have to react quickly when there's an environmental issue or a situation that we need to respond to or react to with content or a campaign. And we've never hit a design wall with SharePoint. We're able to just make things happen and get stuff up in the time that we need to.
We can do a lot of things with a very small team. In our previous platform, the main problem was a lot of the content managers had to know HTML, XML to edit the pages or link between pages. With SharePoint, that become almost transparent, so they don't need to have like a very strong technical knowledge. SharePoint provides that transparency that we cannot find anywhere else.
We have a very large flagship site, something like 6,000 pages, so we're not that small for an NGO. We have at least 2 or 3 other branded sites, and we have some 15 international websites. Using SharePoint, we've developed templates for our international websites where the templates read from a local dictionary, like a Bahasa dictionary, a Spanish dictionary, a Japanese dictionary. All they have to do is focus on the content, the core of the page. All of the local language elements are fed from a list in SharePoint, so it's very easy to implement.
At conservation.org, we receive 30,000 hits a day, and sometimes we have peak of 60,000 hits. And for a homepage that has so many assets, we have thousands of pictures there. We have super huge images. We're able to deliver in very fast mode.
It's a really exciting time right now because the web is allowing for us to reach all of these audiences, to galvanize and really make a true impact, an aggregated impact across all of these sectors. For us, the web is our brand tool, it's our fundraising tool, but most importantly, it's our movement tool. It's a way for us to bring the right partners to the table in the name of conservation.
It's important to have a tool that lets me develop, create, and deploy quickly and without hassles, and that's what SharePoint does for me.
Good morning. How are we all today? Everybody good? All ready for 3 days of fun? Everybody had 6 cups of coffee then? We had a few people a bit early getting up this morning, I saw, on Twitters and trains and all sorts going on. I'd like to welcome you officially to the 2011 Best Practice Conference. We've had people coming from far afield again this year. In fact, we've broken the record from last year, which was quite interesting considering last year we actually had something stopping a lot of us actually getting here, right? But this year we have no such problem, so there's lots of people from all over the world come here to see us. And my name's Steve Smith from Combined Knowledge, and I'd officially like to welcome you all here to London to our Best Practice Conference. So just to kind of show you all where we've all come from, 25 countries plus so far. I say so far because people seem to be registering up to the last minute, so who knows who's going to drop through the door. I would just like to say, I don't know if the person's in the room, but we've had one person from Jamaica register, and before anybody else starts to think it, I've already got first dibs on the SharePoint job that's out there. We've also got all our speakers here from all over the world this time, and I think there was more determination this year than ever to make it here and be part of this, especially after last year. And so much so, we had to limit some of the speakers to only one session because we just didn't have enough sessions for everybody. So hopefully you guys are all going to get some awesome content, I'm sure you will, over the next 3 days in the various tracks that you attend. But don't forget, if you miss anything, it's not a problem. We record everything. You're going to get the full DVD pack afterwards of every session, fully recorded, so you can always go back and watch them again. So, I'm not going to bore you too much this morning because I want to get over to the keynote as soon as we can. A few little things to talk about. As those of you who's been to our conferences in here before? Put your hands up if you've been to our conference here before. Welcome back, you lot. Fantastic to have you all back. Who's here for the first time? Wow. So you've heard the stories of the parties, right? It's got nothing to do with the sessions. So it kicks off tonight. First things first is the exhibitor evening. We say the exhibitor evening because this is where we like to give something back to all those sponsors that are here helping to make this happen. Without them, we cannot have what we do here in London. They're a key part of it. We like to make sure that there's a way that we can all have some fun and spend some time with the exhibitors. And we always have fun. And those of you remember last year when we had the little games stuff going on? I can't forget AvPoint when they had the mind game where you had two people battling it out and you had to use your brain waves to move the ball from one end to the other. And the problem is, whoever won got the token to get a drink. So those people that started to win got worse as the night progressed. Easy meat. So the exhibitor evening is going to be tonight, straight after the sessions finish. We've got about a half-hour gap. 7:30, not 7:30, sorry, 5 o'clock in the exhibitor hall till 7 o'clock. We've got some interesting surprises. You'll love it. It's worth coming. After that, we've got SharePoint. SharePoint is literally just up the road from the conference venue. Everybody's welcome to that. There'll be speakers and exhibitors and attendees there, and we'll all be having a lemonade and a Coke, and just chatting and catching up. And then there's this little thing of a party. And this year we've kept it secret yet again. This year it's going to be at the Guanabara Bar, which is, I'm not going to say too much actually because I don't want to spoil the fun there either. Needless to say, you're going to have a lot of fun there. We've got a lot of things lined up. And this year we've done something a little bit different. We've actually lined up a bunch of buses to take everybody there who's around this area. So from 7:30 onwards, I believe, we've got buses, 7:30 to 8:15. There'll be buses outside the conference venue to shuttle you to the venue. So for those of you that are not sure about where it is, just turn up here and we'll get you there. Obviously, if everybody turns up at 7:30, there'll be a big queue. But we've got plenty of buses doing that. And this is in a nice old historical area of London as well. But it'll be a lot of fun. The hint is in the picture, I guess. I'll say no more. So this year, we're doing something a bit different for Ask the Experts. Previously, we've always done the Ask the Experts in the various rooms. This year, we're doing one combined Ask the Experts on this stage. So everybody's going to converge on here on Wednesday afternoon at 4:15, and we're going to have microphones so you can ask questions from the week. If you're in a session and you've got Twitter firing up, #LondonBPC is our tag for just firing questions at the Ask the Experts. We'll pick a bunch out at random. Random. The speakers won't let me do that. I'm like, I want that one. So we'll get some questions out, and that'll be the final part of Wednesday afternoon. So we're all going to converge on this room for that. So that'll be a lot of fun. So either Twitter us. If you haven't got Twitter and you just want to ask some questions, if you come to the Combined Knowledge stand, we'll have laptop access where you can actually Twitter from there as well. So having said that, we will have microphones, so you don't need to worry about it. Now, before we get onto the actual keynote, I thought I'd better explain a little bit about this construction work that's going on outside. As some of you may have noticed, there's a bit of disruption going on at the minute, which we were a bit put off by. So I thought rather than explain to you exactly what the reason is for this construction, I thought I'd actually go to the source of the problem. So, Your Majesty, if you would kindly join us. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Majesty. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Excellent,
Very
excellent.
well.
So I understand this has got something to do with you that's going on outside.
Yes, we have a small family wedding later on this month.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
All right. Anybody we know?
No, I don't think so. They're not in your IT circles. I don't think they're terribly IT aware. They may be a little bit, but I'm not too sure. I know I'm not. But I do hope that it's not going to interfere with your conference and that you have great enjoyment of it.
Well, thank you very much.
Being in London, I think that lots of people visit us from London, to London, are they?
Oh, yes, we've got people all over the world, yes.
Fantastic.
Jamaica, in fact, one of the olden...
Oh, yes, yes. Yes, very good. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I hope you all have a great time in spite of all that's going on outside. And unfortunately, we can't offer you any seats out there because I think they're all for the press.
Yeah, well, yeah. I heard they were going quite expensive as well, actually.
Yeah, probably, yes, if you can get one. I think they're probably all gone.
Well, thank you very much for coming. Would you be so kind as to introduce our keynote speaker for us? I actually understand there may be some history to this.
Ah, yes, obviously. I think he is an old friend of ours. I think his family, we know his family well. Mm-hmm. And he came from comes from New Zealand, but he actually now lives in Seattle. Ah. And it's Chris Johnson from Microsoft.
Fantastic. Let's introduce Chris Johnson.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
She looks better in person than I ever imagined. Well, thank you very, very much for that very kind and completely unexpected introduction. As Steve pointed out, my name is Chris Johnson. I'm a Senior Technical Product Manager on the SharePoint team at Microsoft in Redmond. And it's an absolute honor and a privilege to come and talk with you all today. This is the first time I've attended this conference. I've heard incredible things about it, and it certainly seems to be the place to be for all this expert knowledge sharing and so on. So I'm very excited to hear sessions during the rest of the week, and I'll be keenly attending a number of them. But today I wanted to talk to you about three real sort of areas of my presentation. The first is a little bit about momentum and how SharePoint is doing as a business and how the ecosystem and community are doing. The second is a little bit of a history lesson on how we got to this point. Some of the things we think about at this point when we're in a product release cycle. And then finally, the third part, I want to go into what we think about moving forward and how we decide what we do for the next release and how you guys help us shape that process. And so I want to show you some of the things that we think about during this and where we're at right now and those sorts of things. So a little bit about where we're at. SharePoint is doing very well, in no short part because of the efforts of the community, customers and partners throughout the world who have just absolutely incredible and have propelled the product to the point it's at. Some interesting statistics up on the screen here. Around 70% of enterprises now use SharePoint as part of their daily business, which is a staggering number of people. If you think about end users in seats at those organizations using SharePoint to do their daily jobs. 1.3 billion in business for SharePoint in and of itself is not really that interesting, other than, it's obviously great for Microsoft, but the more interesting number around this is the pull-through of services and partner products as part of this. So we see about between 5 and 7 billion US dollars of partner pull-through based on SharePoint as a business today, which is absolutely staggering and phenomenal to see so much being done with SharePoint. That ranges from everything from little widgets you might buy to extend your experience all the way through to services to help you implement SharePoint. We're seeing just over 2,000 .com sites up on the internet today. I have a little screenshot of those a little later on. But there are all sorts of customers coming online with SharePoint every day. People from Starbucks who have rolled out laptops to the majority of their cafes in the US and have started offering email services to employees that would have normally not have seen much of the IT department before this time. And they're using it to really help reach out to their staff in new and interesting ways as they try to reinvigorate their business and get back on top of things. Gartner and Forrester, if you're familiar with these analyst organizations, we do a lot of work with them to help them understand our business. And we're seeing great results in terms of the Magic Quadrants and market scopes and so on, as SharePoint being in the leader quadrant in all of those, across workloads and these kinds of things. So it's amazing to see that. This screenshot just shows you, I went up to wssdemo.com. If folks haven't ever been up there, it's a site run by a fellow Kiwi, Ian Morris, down in New Zealand. And he basically scours the web in an automated way now. It all started manually, but he does it in an automated way, looking for SharePoint sites on the internet, and then puts them all on a big SharePoint list and points PowerPivot at it. And you can build these amazing visualizations, and it has a great set of filtering capabilities and so on. So you can drill down and find SharePoint sites, maybe in your area or your industry, or the particular version of SharePoint that it's using, and get this really, this is kind of a scattershot approach, but you can drill down and see more detail about who's using SharePoint this way. Now, as it comes to developers are near and dear to my heart. It's kind of my background, and so I thought I'd throw a slide in here on some of the momentum we're seeing around SharePoint, specifically how it relates to developers. Now, the left-hand side is a quote. The right-hand side is a table from a survey we recently saw where if you put a tick in a box that say you have SharePoint skills, you get paid 11% more. Now, that's obviously really good on one part, mainly for the folks who are going for these jobs, but it also has a sort of a underlying negative in the fact that you have to pay more to get SharePoint people. So we have some problems around fixing that and making sure that people can get the right resources at the right time and that we have enough people trained and so on. But it was just an interesting thing I saw the other day. When we think about SharePoint, it really fits as part of this entire vision we call the future of productivity. It really comes in three parts. The first, we want to deliver the best productivity experience across the PC, the phone, and the browser. Whether that be Office, SharePoint, Lync, Exchange, all of these things. As the IW group at Microsoft, we want to be able to give you the experiences you know and love on whatever device and whatever platform you happen to be. The second part is all of these buzzwords flying around about the cloud that you hear at the moment. We're well aware that this suits some people now, it might suit some people in 5 years' time. We want to deliver you the cloud and the capabilities that that brings on your terms, when you're ready or if you're ready, and not just force it down your throats. And then finally, all of these are underpinned by a rich set of collaboration and workload capabilities that deliver you these experiences, whether it be voice and video, whether it be collaboration through your browser for document management or records management or something, or if you're searching for things in your organization, having this rich framework of capabilities at your disposal across those devices and across the environments that you choose to deploy them. One of the first sort of steps that we took recently around helping get to the point of being able to deliver these things on all these different types of devices and so on was the work that we did in Windows Phone 7. Who has one of these, by the way? Hands up. Oh, that's a pretty good percentage. Excellent. I like it. Well, we are still early. I'm not downplaying the fact that you shouldn't have one. I'm saying it wasn't that long ago that we launched, and so it's great to see a nice percentage of you already. I think they're brilliant phones. So one of the things we did there is introduce the Office Hub. If you're anything like the average Windows Phone 7 user, you've probably flicked through this a couple of times and moved on and not thought much more about it yet. But trust me, when you start using this, hooking it up to your SharePoint sites, connecting it up to your SharePoint Online sites, it really can change the way you work. For example, I use OneNote on my Windows Phone daily for just taking quick notes, and I never have to worry anymore about where's that piece of paper gone, or when I sit back down at my desk, I have to get my phone out and start looking through my notes. It all just syncs for me. So I take a note on my phone, it syncs up to my SharePoint Online site where I have my OneNote files stored. And then on my PC, I have the rich experience of OneNote Client, and it's all synchronized when I get back to my desk. So I go away to a meeting, come back, I'm good to go, and all my notes are already there. That's astounding to me that we can do that. And it's really changed the way I've worked with my PC and worked with my phone. And so you should give it a try sometime. With OneNote's a great entry point to this to get started. But you can hook up your Office Document Hub to your SharePoint Online site or to any SharePoint site you might have in your organization and synchronize individual documents down and so on, or save them back up there. It's definitely worth checking out if you have one of these. Which brings me to the next part of our vision. Over on the right-hand side of that previous slide, I mentioned being able to go to the cloud on your terms. We're absolutely committed to bringing you SharePoint software and Office software wherever you happen to be and being able to deploy it into whatever environment you need. We realize that people are quite happy with the power of the PC. Having local software sometimes works for folks. For some other folks, especially small, medium-sized businesses, they don't want to run all of the IT. They don't want to have to buy servers and figure out how to patch them and manage them and maintain them and so on. And so the cloud actually gives them quite a lot of benefits in that regard. And we want folks to be able to use the same software that they use on their PC up in the cloud when they're ready. And so Office 365 is getting real close. We're launching later this year, but you will see announcements from us in the very, very near term on the next steps that we're taking as we get closer to release of Office 365. And that'll really bring the power of SharePoint Online, Lync Online, and Exchange Online to millions and millions of small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and large businesses around the world. And they'll be able to do all the kinds of things that large-scale enterprises can do today because they've got massive IT departments that can help them do this. And being able to just sign up online, provision these services, and then be making VoIP calls and saving documents into the cloud is really revolutionary for these folks. It's worth pausing for a moment and taking a look back at how we got to this point. It's been many, many years since we started making Office way back in the day. And I have a short video I'd like to show you on the history of those, some of those products. You may keep an eye out for a few friends that you know and love during this video. I think Clippy may make an appearance at some point. So I'd like to just roll this video. Who else was freaking out when he went and ticked Microsoft? I was worried he was going to choose Google. The other thing that freaked me out about that video is early on, you know, when they were all sort of dressed up in those old shirts and ties and sort of funny looking, that was all filmed in the building I work in. And so it's, I still get stuck in those little 70s looking offices and so on, where Office was originally started, and these buildings were built for 16, 17, and 18 were all built for the creation of Office and so on. And by the looks of that video, I don't think they've changed since then. So where do we go next? I think that video highlighted a little bit of our history and then where we are today in terms of being able to communicate and collaborate with people. But we're at a point where we start thinking about, well, what do we do next? Contrary to probably many beliefs, we don't sit around for two or so years sort of thinking about how well we've done and then decide what to do in the last 12 months before we release another round of these products. It's a long-running process that takes many years with a lot of people working on it and thinking about the problem in various different ways. We really think about it in 3 phases or 3 big buckets as we start to decide what are we going to go and do next. The first is a very long-term vision, what we call long-term vision anyway, which is really in the sort of the 3 to 5 year time frame. And this is where our planners and visionaries think about what people will want to be doing 3 to 5 years from now, and as it relates to obviously the products that we create. For example, say 3 to 5 years ago, would anybody have asked a records manager and said, are you going to be interested in the information that's coming out of social computing? Probably very, very few in comparison to the wave of those folks that we're seeing asking for these sorts of capabilities today. And so these guys try to think a wee way out and try to divine the future of what people are going to be asking for. Then in the medium term, the 2 to 3 year time frame, this is what we really use to accomplish some what we call big bets. This might be something such as replumbing our internal or the way we do internal things in the product to help facilitate advances that we want to make in the future. So you'll see us doing things around service applications and these sorts of things inside of SharePoint that you might think, well, hold on, you've just changed that for the last 3 releases, why are you doing that again? And typically it's because we want to make big bets in the future and we need to change some of the underlying architecture to be able to go and do that. And then in the near term, sort of the next couple of years, is where we like to take streams of input from folks who are actually using the product, who've got actionable, valid feedback that we can take on board and synthesize in as part of our process. And this is really the area where I feel that best practices plays its biggest part in our process as a product company. We see folks taking our product, going and doing all sorts of things with it that we could have only have hoped to have imagined in our test labs and so on, and when we built the product. And so being able to go back out to people implementing, seeing what folks are doing with our products and bringing that back into the fold and helping us plan out the next phase of what we're going to build is absolutely critical. Third-party experience plays an enormous role in both teaching other folks how to do things, obviously, but also teaching Microsoft how to do things. You have in this room probably the largest gathering of experts on SharePoint that there has been for quite some time. Obviously, you're here to take advantage of those folks. We have people, we have Microsoft certified masters. We have the people that train the certified masters here. We have many of the MVPs from various parts of the world are here, as well as certified trainers and customers and partners from all around Europe and the rest of the world. These are people who have deep, deep knowledge and understanding of the product, thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of cumulative hours of experience to take advantage from. We use these people to help give us feedback through their channels to us on what works and what doesn't in the product. And that really feeds into that short-term bucket that I mentioned in the previous slide. We do that through bringing them onto campus and asking questions about what's working in the product and what's not. We don't generally have a problem getting information out of them. They're a very vocal bunch and they love to tell us their feedback. So it's a great channel for giving us information. We also put an enormous effort into the documentation we do around a product. We got an enormous jump start on 2010 as opposed to our 2007 release in this regard. And we think we've done a pretty good job in comparison to our last release. We got a much more early head start on when we started tackling this stuff. And so you'll see, or if you were interested in SharePoint back in the 2007 release, you will have seen that there was, let's just say, not quite as much documentation as you may have liked when we released. And that sort of came online the 6-month period afterwards. With 2010, we covered so much more right out of the gate when we released, especially as it relates to API coverage and so on. So there's actually an interesting fact here. The SharePoint Developer Center on MSDN, where we publish our SDK, just has tens of thousands of pages of documentation. And around 60 to 70% of the traffic to that site goes to less than 20% of the information that's up there. Which is kind of interesting for a couple of reasons. One, it means that we've got a massive API that people aren't really interested in 80% of it. But it also means that people are looking for this information and actively doing projects with it and so on. Can anybody have a guess about what the #1 topic for, as it relates to developers on MSDN is, API coverage-wise? Anybody got a guess? SP Dispose Check, we've got one. Anybody else? Sorry? Search. A little more granular than that. Visual Web Parts. Ooh, he's getting close. Anybody else? SP List is the #1 page on the MSDN Developer Center by far and away. This thing gets hit all the time. We have hundreds of thousands of page requests for SP List documentation every month. Closely followed by building web parts, as you mentioned, somewhere down the front here. Getting started on SharePoint Development 2010, what's new for developers, and then some of our advanced training we have published. But as I said, we have thousands and thousands of SDK pages up there. We also released around 20 to 25,000 pages of what we call protocol documentation. This is basically documentation that documents the various protocols we use in the product for things like how Office clients talk to SharePoint servers, how SharePoint server web front ends talk to SQL servers, and all these kinds of things. And so you can find that all up there. If you're really into reading through all of this protocol documentation, trust me, it's great bedtime reading. I had to write some of it, and it's pretty dry stuff, but it's fascinating to dig in and see how some of these things work. And finally, real world. So Microsoft's SharePoint deployment internally is absolutely enormous. We have something on the order of around 400,000 site collections spread across the world. That ranges from everything from people's My Sites to project sites that people have stood up to business portals. All of those kinds of things are covered under that number. And it's arguably one of the biggest SharePoint deployments in a corporation around the world. But the next biggest SharePoint deployment is going to be Office 365, or is Office 365. We're going live, or will be going live in around 36 markets, 40 different languages. We have 8 geo-distributed and disparate data centers around the world, production data centers. There are some other data centers we use for other sorts of operations, but there's 4 in the US, 2 around Europe, and 2 in the Asia-Pacific area. And we back it with a financially backed SLA that means that if we go into downtime, we start paying you, which scares the living daylights out of us, right? We want this stuff to be up 100% of the time wherever possible and available to our customers. The SharePoint team aren't building these things from scratch. We have a really great team around Microsoft that know how to run and build data centers. And so we piggyback on the same data centers that folks like Bing and Hotmail and Xbox Live use to deliver these services. But my point here is that we are learning a lot as we go through this process on how to run a service. I heard a great quote down the bottom of the slide here: a service is something you do and not something you ship. Microsoft historically has been a company that ships software. It gets packed up in a pretty little box. It gets stamped onto CDs and DVDs and sent out the door. And we know how to do that really, really well. We've done it for a long time and it's worked really well for us. But a service is slightly different, right? It's up 100% of the time. People expect updates regularly. And it's really a completely different mindset that you have to get into rather than these release cycles that we're used to. And so, naturally, we're learning a lot about doing that. And I wanted to share a few things about Office 365 Service, not because it's Office 365 in particular, but because it's interesting from a best practices point of view. So SharePoint Online, none of this is going to be rocket science stuff to any IT pros in the room who've had to go and build SharePoint farms and run them in an organization. But basically, Office 365 is run on a set of infrastructure that it's just big in scale, but really at the end of the day, it's a lot of SharePoint farms. We do it in 3 main tiers. We have obviously physical servers that run in our data centers. They run all the networking and machines and disk and all of these sorts of things. And it's all virtualized. We run Hyper-V on all these machines and use Hyper-V for running all of our what we call these VM roles, which contain a set of services in each one that I'll talk about in a minute, on top of those physical servers. And then finally, these services that sit inside the VM roles could be something like Active Directory service or web front end for SharePoint service, something along those lines. So it's very, very similar to how you'd run a virtualized environment in your organization. The roles that we run on those VMs might be a little different than how you do it back in your organizations or not. We have a series of Windows services that we run for all the kind of infrastructure level bits and pieces, AD and SQL and DNS and all those kinds of things. And then we split SharePoint up into a bunch of different components that run in these virtual machines, and we string together and to build up our farms. I'm not going to go through any of this, but needless to say, the next slide should give you a little insight into how we put all this together. So when you take all of those services, put them into these VMs and deploy them and hook them all up, this is kind of how it looks. I'm not going to get into the acronyms or anything, but really it's just one of these boxy models that help show how we do it. In the green box on the outside, this is depicts a data center. And then the red box inside it are the services and the roles that make up what we require for SharePoint. So we deploy a whole bunch of VMs with various of those services deployed into them that make up your SharePoint farm on a really big scale. Because remember, these SharePoint farms are going to be shared by thousands and thousands of users. And then the green boxes down the bottom just depict some resources and services that we use for doing things like telemetry and monitoring of the SharePoint farms, the network, the disk, how everything's running. And then we go and mirror that exact same environment off in one of our secondary data centers in a geographically separate location for obviously disaster recovery and failover and so on. But running all of this thing is what we call a grid manager. This is a clever little bit of software that we've gone and written that manages deployment of all of these VMs. It automates provisioning. When you go and sign up into SharePoint Online, it goes and provisions everything from working with our billing systems all the way through to rolling VMs out into the production data center and configuring new capacity if required, and also managing, balancing all of those things out to deal with the millions of customers we're going to be up and running with shortly. So how does it relate to best practices? Well, as I mentioned earlier on, we learned a hell of a lot doing this, and we still do. Our teams are back in Redmond getting this stuff ready for release later on this year. We've learned a lot about how people scale SharePoint to this level. I don't believe there's going to have ever been a SharePoint deployment quite at this scale, and so there are things that we've learned as part of that process that we're feeding back into our next release of the product, and also out-of-band releases with things like tooling and guidance to help folks scale SharePoint better. We've learned a lot about how people deploy and manage software once it's out in these environments. These data centers are completely lights out, except for sort of a security guy at the door, and maybe a few people running around changing disks when they fail. But all of our operations team and everything work at a much higher level than servers and racks, and are deploying sort of containers and software and services across these systems from that level. We've learned a lot about what it takes to do things like build-to-build upgrades of our software in production on such massive scale. And so you'll see some of the things that we've learned be rolled back into our planning processes so that we can help make the product easier in the future for everybody. Just a couple of photos here. This photo here on the left is a series of double high containers. Each of these containers store about 2,500 servers apiece. This is the Chicago data center. And so basically, they call them plug-and-play bays. I thought it was kind of cool when I got a plug-and-play joystick when I was 12 years old or something, 15 years old. But this is plug-and-play containers of computers. They roll these things in, literally just plug them into water, power, and air conditioning and so on. And then the rest is taken care of from provisioning and bringing them into our grid for putting either Xbox Live or Bing or SharePoint Online on them and so on. And then inside these containers, I'm sure the blue lights have been added for effect. I'd be pretty amazed if the containers came with the lighting. But this is the view down a center, we call this a center aisle container. So the servers on either side of a center aisle, they also come in left and right aisle configurations. I'm not sure why, but you can take a stroll down the middle of one of these, and it just gives you a sort of a sense of how these things are packed in there and the scale that's involved. This is a 40-foot shipping container. So with a little bit of history on where we've come from with Office, a little bit of where we're going with Office 365, I wanted to give you a look at a video that our envisioning team came up with, which really helps us at the very beginning of a release. It's total dream material for us. We sit down with our envisioning team and they give us all sorts of ideas on the way technology's going. And it really helps us brainstorm and think about the kinds of things that we want to achieve with our software. And so this is one of those videos that I thought I'd share with you. I don't know about you, but I definitely want one of those coffee cups that tells me when I'm ready to work. So just in summary on our best practice, on how best practices applies to the way we think about future product, it really falls into these three buckets. We have teams that think about it very, very high level and dream sequencey kind of stuff around envisioning. We have real world best practices from projects that not only we are doing, but that you're doing as well, and that finally experience and feedback from all these projects going on around the world is something we take extremely seriously and help us influence future product direction. So in summary, SharePoint is going absolutely great. I don't think there's any surprises around that. We feel we're getting towards this vision of the best productivity experience across the PC, the phone, and the browser, with things like Windows 7 and the advances we're seeing there with personal productivity. Also with things we're doing on like OneNote for the iPhone, for example, and things like that we're starting to see come out. We are cloud ready when you are ready. We're not trying to force it down your throats. We want to make it an offer available for you when you want to come along. We may, that could be tomorrow, that could be in 5 years' time. Let you dictate. The cloud needs to be on your terms. And then finally, best practices are key to the way you make sure you succeed at SharePoint deployments. And so as much as SharePoint loves the cloud, SharePoint absolutely loves best practice. Thank you very much.